It was a bright afternoon when Mrs. Elaine Parker parked her car just across the street from the new Fusion Bistro on Main Street. The restaurant had been getting a lot of attention lately for its modern look and trendy dishes, but Elaine wasn't there to try the food. She was there for something more serious. A scheduled health inspection. Elaine, around 70 years old, stepped out of her car with quiet confidence. Her short silver curls caught the sunlight as she smoothed out the soft beige blazer she wore over a cream blouse. Her beige slacks matched neatly, and she carried a worn leather folder under her arm. Her steps were steady, and her calm eyes scanned the front of the restaurant as she approached. When she reached the front door, a young man quickly stepped in front of her. He looked about 25, neatly dressed in a black vest over a white shirt. His name tag read Kyle. His polite smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He seemed unsure of what to make of the elderly woman standing before him. Hi there," Kyle said, trying to be polite but clearly hesitant. "We're not taking walk-ins right now. We're fully booked for the afternoon." Elaine gave a small smile and replied, "I'm not here for lunch, young man. I have an appointment." Kyle paused, glancing over her clothing and the folder in her hand. He didn't ask her name. Instead, he looked past her, as if hoping someone else might appear. "Right," he said slowly. "We usually handle appointments online. Maybe check in next door. I think the cafe might have room." Elaine's smile faded just slightly. She held her folder a little closer and said, "I'm here on behalf of the city. I'm expected." Again, Kyle hesitated. He didn't seem to take her seriously. His voice remained polite, but his tone carried a hint of dismissal. "Sorry, ma'am. I don't think we have anything scheduled. Maybe try calling ahead next time." Elaine's calm eyes met his. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. Instead, she opened her folder and pulled out a small notebook. Without saying another word, she began to write something down with a pen from her pocket. Kyle's eyes followed her hand. He blinked, unsure of what she was doing. A couple waiting nearby watched silently, sensing that this wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. Elaine looked up and said, "I'd like to speak with your manager, please." Kyle's smile faded now. The confidence in his posture wavered. For the first time, he looked closely at the folder in her hand. A small city seal was visible on the corner. His expression changed. Surprise flickered across his face, followed quickly by mild regret. "I'll get the manager," he said quietly, stepping aside and opening the door. Elaine nodded and walked in without another word. The quiet click of her shoes on the floor was the only sound in the entranceway as the story began to unfold. The manager appeared from the back of the restaurant, his face already carrying an air of impatience. He was in his mid-30s, dressed in a neatly pressed suit, and his movements were sharp, as though he was used to handling customers who expected things to be done quickly. His name tag read Jason, and he walked toward Elaine with a tight smile. "Yes, how can I help you?" Jason asked, his voice polite but a little cold. Elaine didn't waste any time. She held up her folder, showing him her city health inspector badge. "I'm Mrs. Elaine Parker, here for a scheduled inspection," she said simply. Jason's eyes flickered to the badge, then back to her face. His smile faltered just a little, but he quickly regained his composure. "Oh, of course, Ms. Parker. I wasn't aware we were expecting an inspection today," he said, his tone softening now that he saw her badge. "I'm sure everything's in order. Let me show you to the kitchen." Elaine gave a small nod, but there was no rush in her movements. She followed him down the hallway, her steps steady. As they passed by the tables in the dining area, she noted the cleanliness of the floor, the way the chairs were arranged, and how the staff moved around the room. From experience, she knew that first impressions often told her more than people realized. They reached the kitchen, where a few staff members were prepping food. The air was warm with the smell of fresh spices and cooked meats. The kitchen was bustling, but everything seemed under control. Jason gave her a quick glance and gestured toward the counter. "Feel free to take a look around. I'm sure you won't find anything out of place." Elaine didn't respond right away. Instead, she pulled a small notebook from her folder and began to take notes, scanning the kitchen carefully. She looked at the cleanliness of the counters, the temperature of the refrigerators, and the way the staff handled the food. She moved from one area to the next, her eyes sharp but not unkind. The staff seemed a little nervous as she walked around. They tried to act normal, but it was clear that a health inspector's presence made everyone uneasy. Elaine didn't say much as she observed. She simply noted things down with the quiet professionalism she had built over many years in her line of work. The manager stood at the edge of the room, watching her. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture a little stiffer now. He had probably hoped for a quick, easy inspection, but it was clear from the way Elaine moved that she wasn't in any hurry. After a few minutes, she finally turned to him. "I'll need to see your temperature logs and food storage practices," she said calmly. Jason hesitated, then nodded, turning to retrieve the papers. His earlier confidence seemed to be slipping, and he began to understand just how thorough she was. Elaine wasn't being difficult. She was simply doing her job, and in that moment, she knew that the standards she was checking were important, not just for her report, but for the safety of every person who would walk through the restaurant's door. As Elaine stood in the center of the kitchen, she scanned the various workstations, carefully observing everything around her. The kitchen staff continued their work, their movements quick and precise, but there was a noticeable tension in the air. They all knew that health inspections could be unpredictable, and today, it seemed, was no exception. Elaine moved to the far end of the kitchen, where the fridge and freezer units were located. She opened the first door and peered inside, taking note of the organization of ingredients. The vegetables were stacked neatly, but she noticed a few items with labels that seemed outdated. She pulled out her notebook again, scribbling a few quick notes. The fridge door closed softly behind her, and she turned to the freezer. It was slightly colder than usual, which was a good sign. Still, she checked the temperature gauge on the wall and made a note of it. As she did so, she overheard a quiet conversation between two staff members near the sink. "Do you think she'll find anything?" one of them whispered. "Probably," the other replied in a low voice. "She looks serious. We just have to hope she doesn't notice the labels." Elaine raised an eyebrow, but didn't respond. She knew the staff was nervous, and while she could sense their discomfort, she had a job to do. She simply moved on, making her way to the prep counter, where several plates of food were being assembled for the next order. As she stood there, taking in the cleanliness of the surface and the handling of the ingredients, Jason reappeared with a folder in hand. He walked toward her, his posture a little less confident than before. "Here are the temperature logs you requested," he said, handing her the papers. Elaine took them without a word, flipping through the pages quickly. She paused at a particular entry where the temperature of the refrigerator had been recorded a few degrees higher than recommended. She raised her eyes to Jason, her gaze steady but questioning. "This is a bit high. Are your refrigerators always this warm?" she asked. Jason looked at the paper, his face flushing slightly. "Oh no, we had an issue last week, but it was fixed immediately." Elaine nodded slowly. She had heard similar excuses many times before, but she didn't press the issue further. Instead, she turned her attention to the food storage area. As she walked over to check the shelves, one of the cooks glanced at her, visibly nervous. She met his eyes for a brief moment, then moved on. She wasn't there to make anyone feel bad, but she had a responsibility to ensure that everything was up to code. After a few more minutes of silent observation, she closed her notebook and looked at Jason. "I'll be leaving a preliminary report today. Please make sure these issues are addressed right away." Jason nodded, his expression serious. "Thank you, Ms. Parker. I'll make sure everything gets fixed." Elaine gave him a small smile and nodded, but didn't say anything more. Her job wasn't to supervise the changes. It was to make sure they happened. She turned and began walking toward the door, her steps measured and calm. As she stepped outside into the afternoon sun, She took a deep breath. The job was done for now, but she knew that her report would make a difference. She was satisfied with the thoroughness of her inspection, knowing that it wasn't just about finding problems. It was about ensuring safety for everyone who would eventually walk through those restaurant doors. As Elaine stepped out of the restaurant, the warm afternoon sun greeted her, but there was a slight tension in the air. She had finished her inspection, but she could still feel the weight of the moments inside when the staff and manager had watched her closely, unsure of how to react. Her work was done, but there was always a quiet satisfaction in knowing she had done it thoroughly. She walked toward her car, her steps steady and calm. She wasn't in a rush, but her mind was already organizing the details of the inspection she had just completed. The outdated labels in the fridge, the temperature irregularities in the freezer, and a few small cleanliness issues had all been noted. It wasn't a disaster, but it would require attention. Before she reached her car, she heard the sound of hurried footsteps behind her. She turned, and there was Jason, the manager, walking quickly to catch up with her. He had a look of determination on his face, and for a moment, Elaine wasn't sure what to expect. "Ms. Parker," Jason said, slightly out of breath, "I wanted to apologize again for the way you were treated earlier. It was unprofessional, and I understand now how important this process is." Elaine nodded, but she didn't say anything right away. She had seen this kind of apology before. After a mistake had been made, people often scramble to make things right. She understood. "I appreciate that, Jason," she finally said, her voice calm. "But it's not about the apology. It's about making sure things improve." Jason looked at the ground for a moment before meeting her eyes. "You're right," he said quietly. "We've already started making the changes you pointed out. I'll personally make sure the labels are updated, and we'll double-check the fridge and freezer temperatures." Elaine raised an eyebrow, impressed by his response. It was rare that someone took full responsibility for their actions so quickly, especially after a first encounter like the one they had earlier. "Thank you," she said simply. "But make sure the staff is trained properly, too. It's not just about the equipment. It's about how things are handled every day." Jason nodded eagerly. "I'll organize a training session right away. I don't want anyone to feel unprepared again." Elaine smiled faintly. "Good. That's all I ask." With that, Jason hesitated for a moment before extending his hand. "Thank you for your patience, Ms. Parker. I'll make sure this doesn't happen again." Elaine shook his hand firmly, but her expression remained steady. "Just keep it professional, and everything will be fine." As she got into her car and closed the door behind her, Elaine took a moment to reflect. She wasn't one for unnecessary confrontation, but there was always a sense of responsibility that came with her work. She knew she had made a difference today, not just in the kitchen, but in the way the staff would approach their jobs moving forward. The drive home was peaceful, but as she turned the corner toward her neighborhood, Elaine felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had done her part, and the restaurant was on its way to being better. That was all that mattered. The next day, Elaine received a call from the restaurant. It was Jason, the manager, and his voice sounded more confident than the day before. "Ms. Parker," he said, "I just wanted to thank you again for your feedback. We've made all the changes you suggested. The labels are updated, and we've double-checked all the equipment. We've also started training the staff on better food safety practices." Elaine nodded as she listened, a small smile crossing her face. She had expected improvement, but hearing it directly from Jason made her feel that her work had truly made a difference. "That's good to hear," she said calmly. "How's the staff adjusting?" "They're doing well," Jason replied. "A little nervous at first, but everyone's on board now. We've set up regular checks to make sure we stay on top of everything." Elaine appreciated the manager's dedication. It wasn't always easy for people to take criticism well, but it seemed like he was genuinely making an effort. "Keep up the good work," she said. "The small details matter." After the call ended, Elaine felt a sense of peace. She knew that her role as a health inspector wasn't always about finding problems. It was about helping places get better and ensuring that people were safe. She didn't need recognition for that, just results. A few days later, Elaine was driving through the same area and decided to stop by the bistro. She wasn't there for an inspection, but she was curious to see how the restaurant was doing after her visit. Parking her car, she walked up to the entrance. The restaurant looked just as busy as before, with people sitting at tables, chatting, and enjoying their meals. The staff seemed to be moving with more purpose, a clear change from the hesitant movements she had noticed during her last visit. As she entered, the hostess greeted her warmly. "Welcome back. It's great to see you again." Elaine smiled politely. "Thank you," she replied. "I just wanted to check in and see how things were going." The hostess nodded, showing Elaine to a table by the window. "We've made a lot of improvements since your last visit," she said proudly. "The manager's been very strict about making sure everything is up to code." Elaine looked around, taking in the changes. The staff were more confident, and the atmosphere seemed smoother. The kitchen, which had once felt a little frantic, now seemed more organized. It was clear that the team was working better together, and the improvements made a noticeable difference. As she sat down, the waiter approached and handed her a menu. "Can I get you something to drink?" he asked politely. Elaine looked at the menu but wasn't interested in eating. She had a different kind of satisfaction in mind, seeing that the place was on the right track. "Just some water for now." "Thank you," she said, smiling as she thought about the work she had done. It wasn't about the recognition or the thank yous. It was about knowing that the people who came to the restaurant were safer because of her effort. And for Elaine, that was enough. A week later, Elaine was going about her usual routine. The sun was shining through the windows of her small office as she sifted through paperwork, preparing for her next inspection. The work was steady and sometimes repetitive, but it was the quiet satisfaction of knowing she was making a difference that kept her going. She had always been methodical, never rushing through her tasks, and her attention to detail was one of the reasons why she had earned such respect in her field. Some people might not realize just how important the work of a health inspector was, but Elaine knew better. Her job wasn't just about checking boxes on a form. It was about ensuring the safety and well-being of the people who would walk into the restaurants, stores, and facilities she inspected. Just as she was about to take a break, her phone rang. It was Jason from the bistro again. "Miss Parker, I hope I'm not interrupting," he said. "I wanted to let you know that we've been doing great since your last visit. No issues with temperatures or labels anymore, and the staff has really come together. I wanted to thank you again for your thorough inspection." Elaine smiled to herself. It was rare to hear from managers once the inspections were over. Most of them simply moved on. But Jason was different. "I'm glad to hear things are improving," she said. "Keep it up. And keep checking the small things. They're easy to overlook, but they matter." "Of course," Jason replied. "We've also started a new policy where we'll have a staff meeting every month to go over safety practices. I think it'll help everyone stay on the same page." Elaine could hear the pride in his voice, and it was clear that he had taken her feedback seriously. "Good idea. Regular training goes a long way." After the call ended, Elaine sat back in her chair and thought for a moment. It was nice to know that her work wasn't just a fleeting visit, that it actually helped businesses grow and improve. In a way, she had planted seeds for better practices, and now she could see them starting to sprout. A few days later, Elaine was out for a walk in the park when she noticed something familiar: the bistro. She hadn't expected to see it again, but as she walked by, she noticed the sign outside that read, "We're committed to food safety." The message was simple, but it felt like a small victory. She knew that it was the result of the changes Jason and his team had made since her inspection. It wasn't just a marketing strategy. It was a reflection of the work they had put into improving their practices. Elaine paused for a moment, watching people enter and leave the restaurant. The atmosphere seemed more relaxed now, and she could hear laughter and chatter coming from inside. It was good to know that the restaurant was doing well. She continued her walk, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. There was no need for fanfare or recognition, just the knowledge that her work had helped make a difference, even if only in small ways. And sometimes, that was all that mattered. Weeks passed, and Elaine's routine remained steady. She continued to visit different restaurants and businesses, performing her health inspections with the same dedication she always had. Some places were well maintained, while others still had room for improvement, but Elaine never rushed through her work. Every inspection mattered, whether it was her first or her 100th. One morning, as she sat at her desk reviewing paperwork, her phone rang. It was Jason from the bistro again, which was a bit of a surprise. "Ms. Parker," Jason began, "I just wanted to update you on how we're doing here. Things are going great, and the staff has really adjusted to the new practices. We've even had a few compliments from customers about how clean and organized everything seems now." Elaine smiled, hearing the pride in his voice. "That's wonderful news, Jason. It sounds like the changes are making a real difference." "They are," Jason agreed. "We've been getting more business too. I think people notice when a place is clean and well run. We've even added a new training program for new hires to make sure we don't slip up." Elaine nodded as she listened. It was always good to hear that the businesses she worked with took food safety seriously, but it was especially rewarding when they made lasting changes. "That's exactly the kind of progress I like to hear," she said. "Keep up the good work." As the conversation came to an end, Elaine hung up the phone and leaned back in her chair. It wasn't often that she received calls from businesses after her inspections, and she appreciated Jason's follow-up. She knew that health and safety weren't always glamorous topics, but it was clear that he and his team understood how important they were. A few days later, Elaine decided to stop by the bistro again. She wasn't there for another inspection, but she was curious to see how things were going. When she entered, the hostess recognized her right away. "Welcome back, Ms. Parker," the hostess greeted her with a smile. "It's so nice to see you again." Elaine smiled politely and nodded. "Thank you. I just wanted to see how things were going." The hostess led her to a table near the window, where she could get a good view of the restaurant. As she sat down, she noticed that the atmosphere was more relaxed than the first time she had been there. The staff seemed confident and organized, moving smoothly from one task to the next. Elaine observed the cleanliness of the space. The floors were spotless, and the tables were well kept. Even the kitchen, which she could catch glimpses of from where she sat, appeared to be running smoothly. After a few minutes, Jason came over to greet her. He was smiling, and his posture seemed more at ease than it had during her last visit. "Miss Parker," he said, "I'm glad you stopped by. I wanted to thank you again for everything you did for us. Things have really turned around, and we're proud of the improvements we've made." Elaine nodded, her expression calm but pleased. "It's good to see that the changes are working. I can tell you've put a lot of effort into it." "It's been worth it," Jason said. "We're seeing happier customers, and the staff is more confident. We've even gotten some positive reviews online." Elaine smiled softly. "I'm glad to hear that. It's always nice when the hard work pays off." As she sat back and watched the bistro come alive around her, Elaine felt a sense of quiet pride. It wasn't about the recognition or the praise. It was about knowing that she had helped make the place better, safer, and more successful. For Elaine, that was all that mattered. The next month brought more routine work for Elaine. She visited schools, diners, coffee shops, and food trucks. Each place had its own strengths and weaknesses. She gave fair reports, offered advice, and left without expecting anything more than effort from those she inspected. Her quiet presence had become something people respected, even if they didn't fully understand her job at first. One afternoon, Elaine returned to her office after a long day. Her feet were tired, and she was looking forward to a quiet evening. As she placed her leather folder on the desk, she noticed an envelope sitting on top of her paperwork. It had no stamp. Someone had delivered it by hand. She opened it carefully and pulled out a neatly folded letter. Inside was a handwritten note from Jason, the manager of the bistro. The letter was short but thoughtful. "Dear Miss Parker," it began, "I wanted to personally thank you once more for your visit to our restaurant. Your inspection wasn't just helpful. It opened our eyes. We've grown stronger as a team, and we've earned trust from our customers. You reminded us what professionalism and respect look like. I hope more people learn from your example. Sincerely, Jason." Elaine read the letter twice before folding it again. She placed it in her desk drawer with care. She didn't need letters to know her work mattered, but receiving one reminded her that people were still paying attention. Sometimes change happened slowly, but it did happen. Later that week, a local newspaper published a small feature titled "Quiet Heroes of Our City." One of the names mentioned was hers. A short paragraph described her years of service as a health inspector, her calm approach, and the way she helped businesses improve rather than punish them. It wasn't a long article, but it was enough to make her pause. She never did the job for praise, but it felt good to know her actions had left a mark. One Saturday, while shopping at the farmer's market, Elaine heard someone call out. It was the young hostess from the bistro. "Miss Parker," she said, walking over with a smile. "You probably don't remember me, but I just wanted to say thank you. The staff talks about you all the time. We learned a lot that day." Elaine remembered her, of course. She nodded kindly. "I'm glad you're doing well," she said. "Keep learning, keep improving." The hostess nodded. "We are. And we try not to judge people so quickly anymore. That first day, we got it wrong. But we've changed." Elaine looked around at the busy market, filled with people of different ages, races, and backgrounds. She thought of how one moment, a denied entrance, a quiet inspection, a changed attitude, had started a ripple. She walked away slowly, carrying her groceries and feeling at peace. She didn't need cameras or applause. Real change happened when no one was watching, and she was proud to be part of that quiet kind of work.